Welcome to The Joyful Frugalista, the podcast that's all about living a richer life with less. I'm your host, Serina Bird, author and passionate frugalista. Each episode, we dive into inspiring stories, practical tips and joyful conversations that help you create abundance, embrace mindful spending, and live your best life, all without breaking the bank. So grab a cuppa, get comfy, and let's explore how being a frugalista can lead to freedom, happiness, and a whole lot of joy. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice. Please consult a qualified professional before making financial decisions. Hello, frugalistas, and welcome. Today I have a special guest, and of course, all of my guests are special. Today I'm going to speak to someone about entrepreneurship with a special focus on online businesses. But first, if you love this podcast and find it useful, please pay it forward by liking or commenting, and also join the Joyful Frugalista Facebook group to join in on discussions with like-minded frugalistas. Today we're diving into secrets of the new online entrepreneurs, the title of a new book written by bestselling author Bernadette Schwerdt. Bernadette is the founder of the Australian School of Copywriting. She's a TEDx speaker, an award-winning author, and ghostwriter for leading Australian CEOs and entrepreneurs. She is also a professional actor and has appeared in Neighbours, The Games, Round the Twist, Winners and Losers, and Jack Irish. And I certainly didn't expect that when I read that, so that's really quite unique. Amongst other things, she is also a trained yoga teacher and was the inaugural in-house mindfulness coach for the Carlton Football Club. And this shows it's reflected in the amazing access and insights she shares in her latest book because she's got some amazing insights from some amazing people. So hello, Bernadette, and congratulations on your latest book.
Thank you, Serena. It's great to be here.
Well, I really did enjoy this book, and I enjoyed your first one in the series, and I know you've written many books. I think you've got 5 or 6 on your website now.
Yeah, 3 of my own, and I've written about 7 ghostwriting as well and coached about 10. So I've taken all that information actually and put it into this new book because my first book was 2015, then 2020, and all these entrepreneurs are quite interesting because they morph, they evolve, they devolve, and I really wanted to know what they had done, the last 10 years. And plus, of course, I added a whole bunch of new entrepreneurs to this new book. So yeah, all these books and experiences I've had are reflected in this new book.
I certainly see this with this focus on new. So what is new? How are they different from traditional business owners?
Yeah, I kind of divided the book up in some respects into entrepreneurship in essence. What are those classic evergreen qualities that you need in order to succeed in any business? And then I looked at more of the online tactics, platforms, marketing strategies, etc., that you really do need to understand in order to move into this world that we're in. And that, of course, traversed things like social media and funnels and email, websites, AI, etc. So kind of looking at what are the good businesses doing in order to be both frugal, to speak to your topic, but also, and that would be a point I'd make too, Serena, is that very few of the entrepreneurs spend anything on things that they don't need. Even really big companies and very successful, they keep it really, really lean. And if it doesn't generate a profit, or it doesn't contribute to some bottom line result, it doesn't get done. So yeah, they were the 2 ways in which I distinguished online and entrepreneurship, but also the rise of the personal brand. I think is really interesting. Janine Ellis, I interviewed in the book, Boost Juice lady, and she said that when she was building her Boost Juice, which of course is just it's a product, and there's lots of those competitors out there. How do you distinguish one juice company from another? She said when she stepped out from behind the desk and built her personal brand and really focused on putting her forward, she said really things changed. And I thought that was really interesting because I think a lot of entrepreneurs step away from the public sphere, from the microphone. They think, I'll let the product do the job or let the service sell themselves, and it can, but if you put yourself forward, you become an asset for your brand as well. That can work 24/7, while the other entrepreneurs who are maybe hiding behind the desk, you will prevail.
It's really interesting. And I know Janine Ellis, she's very, very famous and she speaks a lot, but you do highlight in the book, why that was a deliberate strategy. She'd done a lot of very intentional work about building her brand. It didn't just happen by chance.
That's right. And I think she went and learnt public speaking, presentation skills. She got a coach. she learnt to tell her story. And it's actually a really interesting story that I didn't know before I interviewed her about, she was 22, she left Melbourne, just went to travel the world. She didn't have a degree, and she just worked on boats. She worked in marketing, worked in publicity, and accumulated all these skills, but learned how to work with people and be really good with people. And when she came back, she had a baby. It wasn't really in the plan. She was a single mum. And from there, it just grew. And I think the point she makes, which I think is really interesting too, is the partner you choose in life is critical. So she met Jeff, and he's been a partner in the businesses since the beginning. And that is the most important partnership you will ever make. And I do talk a lot about partnerships in this book because I think that's under discussed a lot in business environments where partnerships appear to succeed, but you don't see the backstory, you don't see the infighting, and of course the breakups, which are seen with Atlassian. And you don't have to go far to see the partnership problems that people have. So, these are all the things that I'm covering in the book about how you can be successful.
Really liked your chapter on partnerships because this is something I guess I have wrestled with in the past because certain investors will not invest in companies that don't have a co-founder. So there seems to be almost a push to have the three. Now let's see if I can remember, and you cover it in your book too, the hipster, the hacker, the
The hacker, the hustler,
hustler, the
they're all
salesperson.
really in these days, they're all hipsters. But it's the hacker, the hustler, and the CEO or the expert. And so the hacker and the hustler is not my idea. That was from Y Combinator. But the point being, you need someone who's really good technically to build the website, build the app, whatever it is, particularly if it's going to be a software product, obviously. But you also need the front person, the salesperson, the person who's building the relationships and the distribution, who's out and about doing the thing. And often those two people, those skills are not in the same person. If you look at the traditional hacker, they don't want to be in the front seat. They don't want to have the light on them. So if you can find these complementary people to work with you, but what's missing, in my opinion, in that model is the third person, is the CEO or the visionary or the manager in some respects. Because if you have those two, the hacker and the hustler, they have to make a decision at some point. And if they both disagree, it's a deadlock. So if you bring the third person in, who's neutral, supposedly, then they can help be that decision maker. And in fact, if you do any kind of accelerator, as I've done, they'll often say there should be almost like an agreement that when there is a deadlock, one of you makes the decision and the other one agrees that whatever it is, they'll go along with it. So I think this, and then Bondi Sands did this beautifully. There was Sean Wilson, who was the operations manager, marketing kind of guy. And then there was Blair James, who was the salon tanning expert, the chemical, person in that respect. And they brought in a man, I think it was called Craig Stewart, and he was from Revlon, ex-Revlon. So general manager, he understood retail, distribution, pharmacies, all that kind of stuff, the beauty world. And he got them in to all those pharmacies. He opened those doors. He understood that vernacular of that world. And Sean's very open about that, saying without Craig, that the success they had might have happened, but it would have been a lot slower. So I think bring people in. I think it's very difficult to do things on your own, unless, of course, you're going for a one-person operation, which is completely fine. But you probably won't be having a big exit, if it's just you. But if you want to go big, then those three occupations, I think, are quite critical.
Thank you. And you also cover a lot of work about how to prepare for a partnership, including, I think you call it a disagreement. Is that right? Like,
Yes, yes. So everyone wants an agreement, of course, but and this is from Kobe Simet, one of the men I helped write his book. He's a business coach and an accreditation expert. So he understands why businesses fail because he's in the business of looking at the points of failure in a business. And if you understand the points of failure, then you can understand the points of strength. So his thing was write an agreement of what we're going to do, but also write the points of disagreement. So what would we likely disagree about? And it might be the way the money is spent. It might be how much money or income we can take, how much work's going to be done and who's going to do it. What are our first hires? What kind of companies are we going to pitch to? These kind of questions don't really get discussed, because what happens, and I make the point in the book, two women that I know became a partnership because they were friends and they had similar interests in education, a tutoring school that they put together. It imploded within 4 months and they were school mums, right? So they had to see each other
wow.
12 years at the school gate. really stressful. It kind of impacted their entire schooling experience because they didn't want to see each other anymore. And that kind of experience occurs when there's not enough a discussion up front about what are we doing here? What are our complementary skills? What, all the questions I've just covered. So if you go in with your eyes open thinking this will fail, how do we work backwards to ensure it doesn't?
A lot of good decisions. So I want to go back a little bit, but also forward. So we were talking about how a lot of business owners are often frugal. So, particularly those listeners who might be thinking of starting their own business, do they need a big budget to start a business?
That's obviously how long's a piece of string. I think there's a couple of ways you can look at it. The first thing is try and get a client really quickly. I think there can be a lot of effort put into something without a lot of results. And obviously, the longer that goes on, the more dispirited you get. So if you can find a customer quickly, not 10 customers, but one, and that's a validation of your idea as well. And that's a critical element here. If you're working and spinning wheels for months and months and you're not getting a customer, you have to ask the question, what's happening? What am I doing wrong? Is there a market for this? Is there a competitor that I'm not aware of? Am I charging too much? Am I not known enough? There's all these reasons why it may not happen. It may not because the product's bad. It just means there might be other things going on. So get a customer. And once you have one customer, in my opinion, you've got a business because someone has obviously said, I'll pay for that. And the critical thing too, Serena, is you've got to get people to pay for things. You can give away things for free to build your database and build traction. And I get all that, particularly with software, that's important. But at some point, you're going to have to ask people to pay. And that's that zero moment of truth where they're going, I like it, but not that much. And that's a problem. Or, your mum's buying it or your best friend. You have to have people who are unconnected to you buy it. And I think that's a really exciting moment, but that's got to happen pretty quick or else. So I don't think you need a huge budget, but you need to get a customer.
Yeah, very sound advice. So, related to that, for people wanting to start a business, what about if they're working full time? How easy is it in today's economy to start a side hustle that could grow?
Yeah, I was reading a statistic recently and it's saying that there's more people wanting to build their own business and set up their own operation than ever before. So I think the concept of entrepreneurship is growing and I endorse that. I mean, I've been doing my own thing for 30 years, so I didn't need convincing, to leave the corporate world. But I think people are seeing there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of restructuring going on, a lot of redeployment, people being retrenched. People don't even know where they're going to have a job next week, next month, or next year. And I think that's new. I think there's always been obviously these reorganizations, but I think you could, in a bank, for example, you used to be kind of certain you were good. Insurance companies, customer service, all these, even in, top level professional white collar jobs, lawyers, accountants, engineers, I think people thought I'm safe. And I don't think that's the case anymore. And a degree does not equal certainty. Professionals are absolutely at risk. So I think people should be thinking about this, if they're worried about the day to day and not sure of that certainty. What if you were to contemplate at night, weekends, on the train, on the bus, all those little down moments, building up a small side hustle? And I use in the book an example who's actually my nephew, so a little bit of nepotism going here, Serena, but I couldn't ignore in my own family this entrepreneurial spirit. And a young man called Dylan, he's 32, he works in a bank, just as a regular.
I love that story.
They're great. Yeah, yeah. And that's why I know it really well, because I've seen him grow up and I've seen him do what he's doing. And he was, in America on holiday, he saw some cards in a shop, at a game shop, and they were half price to what he'd bought them back home. And he thought, is this just an aberration? So he sort of did a bit more research and he discovered that in America, all these cards that he has paid X for, they've paid 50% less. So he thought, why don't I buy the cards from America, take them home to Australia and try and sell them? And there's a whole community, this Pokemon trading world. Like that was not my world, it's certainly his world. And he'd put them up on Instagram and eBay and they would instantly gravitate, swarm him, with these offers. And so one card led to 2, led to 4, led to 8, and he's sold hundreds of thousands of cards. He makes $100,000 a year as a side hustle while he's working in the bank during the day. So I love those kinds of stories because he never really set out to be an entrepreneur. He just said, hey, I've got all these cards lying around from childhood, and he literally had thousands just sitting in boxes. So he started going through them, and because he'd been doing it for so long, he knew the really good cards, the expensive cards, the vintage cards, and he knew the pricing as well. So he was able to, and look, the reality is anyone with a bit of interest in this could do the same thing. It's just he happens to have a lot of interest. He knows the good cards. He's an expert at it. He's prepared to go through all the minutiae of getting the cards from America, which is actually not that easy. So the point I'm making, he put the effort in and now he's reaping the rewards and he really enjoys it. He says, I just do it when I'm watching TV overnight. So you can do these side hustles. Another lovely story is Adele Samos. She's in my book. She's a social media influencer, young woman, actress, stunt woman. And she was working during the day in a fashion shop at a Westfield Mall. And she would overhear all these conversations with customers and how they're all trying to get a refund or bringing back stuff that was used and all these, tricks and ploys that they would use to get around the system. And she decided to write some comedy sketches around those conversations that she heard during the day. And they became her stock in trade, in terms of she got known for these funny actor-led kind of scenarios because she wanted to be an actress. And she thought, well, why don't I combine what I know about, which is customer service, with what I love, which is fashion, and what I want to do, which is acting. And in that sweet spot, she found social media and she found an agent. She got work. She worked on Ryan Gosling's film, The Fall Guy, as a stunt woman. And, she's had a lot of opportunity because of the work she put in to building a social media profile. But that didn't cost a lot. She understood CapCut, she understood scripting, editing, lighting. She took the time to learn that. Just as I mentioned with Dylan, he took the time to learn about what cards were valuable.
And you have a whole chapter on influencers and, being realistic about the amount of work that's involved.
Yeah, I think that was a really important point to make. I think we can gloss over, we see them, on boats and parties and looking fabulous, and they're all that and more. But what we don't see is the actual work and mechanics and the business behind it. And I did want to shine a light on that because I think that's what this book, I've tried to make it, Serina, is a practical guide where no BS, it's no fluff. It's like, this is how it really is. And that's why I've also talked about the cost of going big. But back on the social media, that if they're wanting to make money, there's a lot to do and they've got to get results. Nobody's going to pay them just to turn up. They want engagement. They want results. So I tried to shine that light on what they do and how they do it. And if you want to, you or me, anyone wanted to do it, how could you begin? What would be the early steps that you take? And just to answer that, my own question would be, you can upload your own profile to existing websites where you can be found as an influencer. So you just upload it, your numbers, your links, whatever. And then brands are looking for people like that and they can start to discover you. So you don't need an agent. You don't need to go big. You might just have 10,000 followers on Instagram. That's enough. LinkedIn, that's enough to get started if you've got good engagement.
How important is audience building? Like, do you need like millions and millions of followers?
No, you don't. You could have as little as 10,000 followers and be considered a micro influencer. And as long as you've got engagement and, people are listening to you and they're connecting with your content, then I think you are interesting and valuable to a brand. I'll give you an example. One of my friends is a cat lover and she never really set out to be an influencer, but she just loves cats and she's got like 7 cats and I think 5 dogs. Lives on a nice big prop in regional New South Wales. Very passionate about cat fostering. So she created this amazing foster enclosure, like it's just like the Taj Mahal for cats. All sorts of, jumping nooks and water features and hammocks and goodness knows what. And she put a video up on Instagram about this cat enclosure. And it went nuts. She got 10,000 followers and then 20,000 and then 30,000 all in 6 months. She's not famous, so she didn't have an existing starting point. And now she's got cat companies throwing brand collaborations at her, cat food, cat litter, cat accessories. And she's become an influencer. So I think that's really inspiring in some respects. So long as you've got this passion, you've got the interest, you've got the knowledge, and you do something that you can maintain, I think that's an important point. You've got to be at this for a number of years, maybe 5 to 10 years before you start to see, significant traction, even though, of course, it can happen more quickly. I think you got to persist, keep posting, even in the void when no one's listening or the perception that no one's listening, and just keep going is probably the lesson I took from all the influencers, which is why you've got to really love your topic.
You've got some great case studies about people who were told, like, just keep going. And it did work out in the end. It took a while, though, in some cases.
Yeah, and again, that was my mission, was to shine the light on the truth behind these success stories. And what we see and what really happens are two different things. And if you do understand the truth of how these successes get built, then when you're going through it and you're having doubt or imposter syndrome or fear and thinking, what's it all about? Have faith, that if you just keep putting one foot in front of the other, keep posting, keep writing, keep sharing, keep being authentic, then the tide might turn. Now, of course, we don't know when that might turn, but you just have to have faith that it will.
Yeah, well said, because I never suffer from imposter syndrome or procrastination. It seems common, especially for women, actually.
Absolutely. And, I coach a lot of people. I've had the School of Copywriting for 20 years and I coach thousands of copywriters to write copy. And the number one thing I think I help with is confidence, because I've been there, done that. I've seen the rabbit holes I've gone down and the mindsets that I've had to work on. And I try and share that with my students, because often it's not about talent. And I think they often think it is. But I've seen less talented people do far more than others who are more talented, simply because they had self belief. And they kept going and they didn't let negative criticism, feedback, online, any kind of trolling deter them. Whereas, some people are very sensitive, and if they get that kind of feedback, they give up. So do distinguish talent from mindset. And if you can manage the mindset, you have a lot better chance of succeeding, even if you're not as talented as others.
So, in terms of that managing mindset, do you have any advice for people, like based on all of the interviews you've done and the incredible success stories you have been around? What are some of the key themes and trends you see?
Big one I took was, don't take things personally. And I think everyone takes things at some level personally, but the entrepreneurs that I've worked with who are like super successful, like big time exits, they totally have faith and belief in themselves. And if they get criticism, they see it as a gift. As difficult as that might be, they go, well, is there truth in this? And who is it coming from is a critical point too. No, they just don't take it from anybody. They compartmentalize. Like, you could see them having, like, one ghostwriting project I worked on with two brothers. They would sort of have a real go at each other right in the middle of a session with me about something. And then the next minute, go, yeah, I'll see you for dinner. Yeah, all good. So that sense of, we can have a robust discussion and be quite direct in our conversation and communication, but it doesn't affect my liking for you, and I think women probably struggle a little bit more with that than men, which is why I think I don't have any evidence for this, that there's a lot more male partnerships than there would be female partnerships, I think. I've got three brothers and I've seen the way that they deal with their partnerships with business and all sorts of things, and they seem to be able to overcome a lot of rocky moments a lot more easily than women. So that's anecdotal. So I think also, my goodness, they work. I think there's a perception that they just rock in and they float around and have a couple of coffees, walk along the stage and do a few keynotes and they go home. It's like, so not the case. They work really, really hard. They love what they do. I think that's an important point to make, that the office is their happy place. And as much as they love their families and all that kind of stuff, the office is truly a place where they enjoy being. And they get a lot from that as well. So they know their product exceptionally well. I think that's another a point I wanted to make, was they look successful and look like it happened overnight. But if you look at Vince LeBon, for example, he created Rolly Nation shoes, the most beautiful shoes that I've got pairs of as well. And he spent 10 years in the shoe business. He started off in doing graphic design for shoes, like in marketing, and then he worked in factories and in trade and going around the world and, selling shoes, what have you. And then he thought, I want to make my own shoe. So when he went to that point, he knew everything about shoes. And also he had the contacts, which really helped. So I think you've got to really know your business, and you've got to understand the ecosystem in which the business operates.
And I guess having worked in that sector for so long, he also knew what people wanted, what they were actually buying.
Well, his story's great. He went to South Melbourne Market with his first shoe and he was literally selling it like anyone else was selling, eggs and oranges and apples. He's like, here's my shoe. And he sold out, because people were walking by going, hey, what's that shoe? And they loved it. And so he just made more. So he did the real true MVP, a minimal viable product, just did a couple of shoes, sold them at the market, see what people wanted, and went from there. So, yeah, I think that's a great story.
Yeah, I love that too. You could have spent, millions of dollars on a launch and, at the end of the day, no one actually wants them.
You've got to sell before you make it, Serena. If you ask about the frugal tips, how do you get started on a budget? Sell it before you make it. Rather than write an online course, for example, put a seminar on, a webinar, or any kind of event and just see who comes, see what questions they have, what kind of problems they're experiencing, and then build it off the back of that and then sell it. You know, rather than just go to market and think, I think they want it, make sure that they pay some money before. Well, Tesla did this famously for their Model 3. They sold 100,000 plus cars before the thing had even been built. And so not only did they get a whole war chest of money to build it with, but they had a built in customer base before they even set the production lines rolling.
I do know people who've sold books before they've even started writing, which to me kind of makes me panic a bit, but they did pull it off.
Well, it's exactly that, isn't it? Why wouldn't you? If you know there's an audience for it and they've paid, now you're just delivering the service.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I have one final question for you, and that is, do you have a Frugalista tip to share?
Well, I do, and it's nothing to do with entrepreneurship. And it was inspired by one of the ideas that you had in your worksheet. Don't buy home brand toilet paper, Glad wrap, or garbage bags. I've done all that, and
Mhm.
it ends disastrously. And garbage bags, you're dragging it across your kitchen floor, and of course it spills out, and you think, okay, I'm now spending an hour cleaning this up. I could have spent $3 extra on getting the proper brand, Glad wrap, and I didn't. And I think that speaks the same for all those other products as well. Sometimes there's a false economy. It's like using cheap providers. You think, well, I'll get a really cheap web developer, or I get a cheap copywriter, or I get a cheap graphic designer, whatever it might be. And it shows really in the work. So I think don't shortchange yourself.
Yeah, for the things that matter for you. So I have to be honest, my late nana, she used to rewash her Glad wrap and use it very sparingly.
Well, I remember my grandma used to hang out brown paper. They used to hold on to all that paper and string, envelopes, what have you, and then just dry it out and bring it back in and use it for notepad and things like that. But I think that vintage, that they call it the frugals for a reason. They're 90, 100, 110s, and they're obviously past most of them now. But that is, I think, coming back, the recycle, reuse, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm really pleased to see that.
Very much so. So, Bernadette, thank you once again for being my guest and congratulations on your book, which is available at all good bookstores and Officeworks, I believe.
Absolutely. Officeworks has been very supportive of my books, which is lovely. And of course, Booktopia, Amazon, etc. So yeah, I hope people can get something from it and build their own online business.
Excellent. Thank you so much.